Look closely at the smoking ruins of history's greatest corporate collapses, and you will find that the fire was not started by a simple accounting error. It was started by a specific, highly contagious psychological infection. In the year 2001, one of the largest corporate empires on the planet vanished almost overnight. It did not fall because of a bad economy or a shift in the market. It was systematically dismantled from within by a leadership group that turned corporate fraud into a dark art form. This is the story of the Enron effect, a textbook case study in how Machiavellian personality traits can infect an entire corporate culture until honesty becomes a firing offense and deception becomes the only path to survival. Today, we are stripping away the complex financial terminology to look directly into the psychology of the predators who engineered this disaster. You are about to see exactly how a small group of highly intelligent, completely amoral executives built a house of cards, convinced the world it was a fortress, and destroyed thousands of lives just to secure their next multi-million-dollar bonus. To understand the Enron effect, we must first define the core psychological trait that drove it: Machiavellianism. Named after the political philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, this personality trait is defined by a cold, calculated approach to human relationships. A Machiavellian individual does not see people as human beings with inherent rights or dignity. They see them merely as instruments to be used, manipulated, and discarded to achieve a specific goal. They are masters of impression management. They know exactly how to project an aura of supreme confidence, competence, and ethical leadership while working behind the scenes to subvert every rule in the book. Where a normal person feels a natural internal barrier when lying, a Machiavellian individual views deception simply as a neutral tool, no different from a calculator or a spreadsheet. When this specific psychological profile takes control of a major corporation, the entire environment begins to warp. The entity stops serving its customers or its employees and transforms into a predatory machine designed to feed the insatiable ego and ambition of the architects at the top. The infection at Enron began when the leadership structure decided to fundamentally alter how success was measured and rewarded within the organization. Under the influence of a highly intelligent, intensely calculating executive team, the company instituted a human resources policy known as the Performance Review System, or more accurately, the Rank and Yank system. Every single year, supervisors were forced to grade their employees on a strict curve. The bottom 15% of the workforce had to be targeted for termination, regardless of their actual performance or competence. This was not a tool for efficiency. It was a psychological weapon designed to create an environment of permanent, low-level panic. The architects of this system believed that human beings are only driven by two things: absolute greed and absolute fear. By forcing co-workers into a brutal, zero-sum war for survival every 12 months, the leadership successfully destroyed any possibility of trust, collaboration, or ethical solidarity among the staff. In a healthy organization, employees work together to solve problems and create value. In a Machiavellian organization infected by the Rank and Yank system, your closest colleague becomes your most dangerous competitor. If you help them succeed, you are actively increasing the chances that you will drop into the bottom 15% and lose your livelihood. Therefore, the culture rapidly evolved into an arena of strategic sabotage. Employees began actively withholding information from one another, quietly undermining projects, and spending more time managing the impressions of their superiors than doing actual, productive work. The system systematically weeded out individuals who possessed strong ethical boundaries or a desire for genuine teamwork. Those who survived and climbed the ranks were the ones who could lie with the most charm, shift blame with the most agility, and step on the backs of their peers without a single moment of hesitation or remorse. The cream did not rise to the top, the most effective predators did. With the culture thoroughly broken, the leadership team was free to deploy their grandest psychological illusion: mark-to-market accounting. This financial mechanism allows a company to estimate the future profits of a long-term contract or investment and log those estimated profits on their current balance sheet the very day the deal is signed. If a normal business signs a contract that might make $10 million over 20 years, they log the money as it actually arrives. Enron logged all $10 million on day one. If the project failed completely a year later and made absolutely nothing, they did not fix the balance sheet. They simply hid the massive losses inside complex, off-the-books corporations that were intentionally obscured by an impenetrable web of legal jargon. This was not accounting. It was a grand, theatrical performance designed to manipulate the perceptions of Wall Street, the regulators, and the investing public. The psychology behind this deception is rooted in pure corporate narcissism. The executives at the top became so consumed by their own mythology that they genuinely believed they were the smartest guys in the room. They believed that because they were brilliant, the rules of reality, economics, and basic math simply did not apply to them. When the actual data began to contradict their narrative, they did not change their strategy, they changed the data. They created a culture where questioning the numbers was treated as a form of heresy. If a young accountant or analyst noticed a multi-million-dollar discrepancy and brought it to their superior, they were not rewarded for their diligence. They were met with cold hostility. They were told that they simply did not understand the complexity of the modern market. They were gaslit into believing that their own eyes were lying to them, or they were quietly routed into the bottom 15% during the next review cycle and purged from the company. This is the essence of corporate gaslighting. When the leadership of an institution is entirely amoral, reality itself becomes a commodity to be manipulated. The executives spent millions on elaborate public relations campaigns, creating glossy brochures and television advertisements that championed the values of respect, integrity, and communication. These words were literally carved into the stone walls of their corporate headquarters. This was a deliberate psychological operation. The louder a corporate predator proclaims their devotion to ethics, the more closely you must watch your pocket. The public values were a shield, a carefully manufactured piece of theater designed to disarm critics and lull investors into a state of absolute security. Behind that shield, the reality was a chaotic vortex of greed, where executives were quietly dumping their own shares of the company for hundreds of millions of dollars while publicly encouraging their own employees to invest their life savings and retirement funds into the exact same sinking ship. The predatory mechanics of the Enron effect extended far beyond the walls of their office building. When an entire organization becomes detached from empathy and ethics, its external actions become weaponized against society. During the energy crisis in California, Enron energy traders discovered that they could manipulate the price of electricity by intentionally shutting down power plants under the guise of maintenance or inventing artificial transmission bottlenecks. They artificially created blackouts, plunging cities into darkness, trapping people in elevators, and shutting down hospitals for one simple reason: it caused the price of electricity to skyrocket by thousands of %. The traders, entirely insulated from the human suffering they were causing by the cold corporate culture they inhabited, laughed about the blackouts on recorded phone lines, joking about how they were extracting money from grandmothers and regular citizens. They did not see families suffering in the heat. They saw a volatility index to be exploited for personal profit. This is what happens when a corporation is allowed to operate as an isolated, sociopathic entity. The individuals within it lose their human identity and absorb the pathology of the institution. The traders were not born monsters. They were regular people who entered a system that rewarded monstrosity and systematically punished empathy. They were conditioned by a Machiavellian culture to believe that if something is legal, or if you can avoid getting caught, it is moral. They were taught that the ultimate metric of human worth is the size of the profit you generate for the apex predators at the top. The culture became a closed psychological loop, an echo chamber where greed was treated as wisdom and compassion was mocked as weakness, completely detaching thousands of educated professionals from the basic foundational values of human civilization. The house of cards inevitably collapsed when the gap between the illusion of profit and the reality of their massive debt grew too wide for even the most complex accounting tricks to hide. Within a matter of weeks, a multi-billion-dollar empire declared bankruptcy. The aftermath was a scene of absolute psychological and financial devastation. 20,000 ordinary employees lost their jobs, their healthcare, and their entire retirement portfolios in an instant. They had worked hard, followed the rules they were given, and trusted the charismatic leaders on the stage. They were left with absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the top executives who engineered the entire deception had already extracted hundreds of millions in personal wealth, insulated from the immediate destruction they had visited upon the lives of the people who trusted them. The predators had eaten their own flock and walked away fat. We like to look back at the Enron scandal as an isolated event, an historical anomaly, a unique moment where a few bad apples slipped through the regulatory cracks. But that narrative is the final, most dangerous piece of corporate gaslighting. Enron was not an exception, it was a blueprint. The exact same psychological mechanisms, the same Machiavellian reward structures, and the same predatory accounting principles continue to operate within the highest levels of global industry today. The name of the company changes, the technology evolves, but the underlying dark psychology remains identical. The system of modern finance capitalism continues to act as a massive, institutional filter that systematically strains out empathy, honesty, and collective care, while steadily elevating individuals with high scores in psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism to the absolute summit of economic power. The modern corporate structure is essentially a legal mask that allows individuals to commit predatory acts without carrying personal, human responsibility. When a company poisons a river, exploits a vulnerable community, or designs a financial product intended to trap millions in permanent debt, no individual executive feels the crushing weight of guilt. They hide behind the concept of fiduciary duty to the shareholders. They claim they are simply following the laws of the market. They turn human suffering into a clean, abstract mathematics of cost-benefit analysis. This abstraction is the ultimate tool of dark psychology. It allows highly educated, otherwise polite individuals to participate in systems of absolute destruction during the day and go home to their families at night without ever recognizing that they have become the monsters they used to fear in fairy tales. The machinery of global power relies entirely on your willingness to believe in the illusion of the mask. It wants you to look at the glass towers, the clean corporate logos, and the inspiring press releases, and see an architecture of progress and benevolence. It wants you to remain blind to the predatory network pulling the strings behind the scenes. The moment you choose to unplug from this collective blindness, the moment you begin to analyze institutions not by what they say, but by the psychological traits they reward, the magic trick completely loses its power over your mind. You begin to recognize that the modern financial landscape is not a fair, rational system built on merit, but an incredibly sophisticated hunting ground designed by apex predators to harvest your attention, your energy, and your future wages. So, how do you survive in a world infected by the Enron effect? You start by refusing to accept their definitions of success. You refuse to allow a cold, transactional corporate culture to dictate your human worth. The next time you enter a workplace that forces you into zero-sum competition with your peers, a workplace that asks you to quietly overlook a small deception, or a workplace that rewards arrogance over empathy, recognize the infection before it takes hold of your own soul. Understand that they are trying to strip away your ethical boundaries to turn you into a compliant tool for their own advancement. Step back into the clarity of your own internal consciousness. Protect your capacity for genuine empathy and solidarity with the ferocity of a soldier defending their home, because those are the very traits the predatory machine is actively trying to extinguish within you. The Machiavellian executives will continue to build their temporary empires of paper and glass, and they will continue to watch them inevitably burn to the ground when the reality of their corruption catches up with them. They will continue to play their dangerous, narcissistic games with the lives of billions, completely insulated by their wealth and their pathology. But their empire over your mind ends the exact second you choose to see the strings. The moment you look past the expensive suits and the gold-painted promises and see the small, hollow minds trying to manage your perceptions, you become completely unmanageable. Turn away from the noise of the corporate arena. Cultivate a space of absolute psychological sovereignty within yourself. Because in a kingdom built entirely on the glorification of predators, the individual who chooses to remain human is the ultimate act of revolution. Turn off the manufactured anxiety, protect your mind, and refuse to be consumed by the machine. If you found value in this deep dive into the dark architecture of corporate power, subscribe to Mindflayer. Leave your thoughts below on the psychology of corporate culture. Stay sharp. Stay free. Turn off the noise, look behind the mask, and reclaim the absolute sovereignty of your own mind.